Treasury for a long time has got these things wrong, as has the Reserve Bank. They are predicting that it'll probably get to 4%. And the good thing is that it looks as though we're getting there. We know that's because there's been changes to the laws to give workers fairer bargaining rights, and also we're slowly seeing the public sector wage caps be removed around the country, and so that's a really positive thing. Having said that, wages are still nearly half inflation, so everyone at the moment is seeing pretty significant real wage cuts.
You're wanting a 7% increase in the minimum wage. That's well over what the business groups are saying. Some economists suggesting if it's more than last year, it could be inflationary. Do you take their point?
Look, I'd say this. First of all, these wage increases are for 1 year only. They make a decision based on the circumstances of this year. They'll make another decision next year and take into account the results. I would say that, and usually minimum wage increases are real wage increases, and this year we're asking for something that's only just going to keep up with the cost of living. They've had, no impact on inflation, so we don't need to speculate or theorise about these things. We can look at the facts, and that's really because the people who get this pay increase are the people right at the bottom, the lowest paid workers. And what happens is they'll just continue to pay their bills and continue to survive where they are at the moment. They won't have extra money to spend because those bills are going up anyway.
It's interesting when you look at the federal government's offer to public servants. It's 10% over 3 years. I think it's 4%, 3.5%, and then 3%. That's probably more in line with the business proposal when it comes to the minimum wage. Are you comfortable with that from the federal government for federal public servants?
Well, look, this is all bargaining. This is what the federal government's come out with as their first offer. The unions that affected obviously want a lot more than that. It's going to be up to them to sit around and have those discussions and work out where that lands. I don't think the unions are accepting the current offer, and part of the reason is that public sector workers, federal public sector workers, as well as lots of other workers, have gone backwards year after year after year, and so people will also be feeling not just the cost of living pressures, but they know that they are poorer than they were years ago. So people are wanting to get back to where they were.
It's interesting. It's not just plain sailing, though, is it? Labor government wins and expectation that they'll do, work in hand in glove with unions. But we're seeing that in New South Wales, where the Health Services Union is going to strike over that public sector wage cap. The government, the Minns government, saying be patient. They've said we've been patient long enough.
Yeah, Kieran, it'd be great, wouldn't it, if governments changed and all of a sudden they did everything we wanted, but that's not life, is it? The essential workers of New South Wales voted, and the people of New South Wales voted for a change here, and those workers have waited a long time for a pay rise, and they suffered through the pandemic, and you can't blame them for being impatient.
Do you get the argument, though, about the inflationary impact if wages do go too high too quick? I know I get your argument about the lowest paid, and it's hard to begrudge anyone on the minimum wage an increase. I totally understand what you're saying, but given every dollar is going to be spent, there is still an inflationary or expansionary impact.
I'd say a couple of things. The minimum wage affects 1 in 4 workers, and every year we know what effect that has for the overall wage price index, and that's like a small bump. It's not just because we're asking for 7% in the annual wage review, that doesn't make wages for everyone 7%, first of all. It doesn't lock in future pay increases for others. It doesn't have knock-on effects for others. So any idea that this is going to lead to sort of higher wages across the economy, we know is just not right. And we know that because every year we get to see that that's not the case. So there's not that concern there. The other thing I would say is quite an interesting point that not many people have talked about, and that's the fact that in other countries that have now much lower inflation than us, because it's been falling faster than us, their wage increases have been way higher. So, for example, both for UK and the US, the average wage increases for the whole of the economy is around 6%. and their inflation has been falling. So I really question the basics of all of this, and that what is causing inflation. And it's got nothing to do with wages here or overseas. It's really got to do with supply chain issues, and some would say, like us, some maintaining at least of profit margins by companies and passing on those costs entirely to the consumer. So once those things start resolving, inflation starts resolving as well.
Just finally, Sally McManus, let me ask you about the Jobseeker increase. You and I spoke before the budget. You said there should be an increase. What's your reaction to the size of it?
Yeah, well, the government's made a start, which is a really good thing. And from listening to them, and obviously I sat on that committee too, the Economic Inclusion Committee, and we recommended a much bigger increase. But they say they don't have the money to do that at the moment. We all do know all the pressures they're under. I think that if this is a start, and if there's a setting of that Jobseeker amount over time to a point where people aren't living in poverty, that's what needs to happen. I say that because, you know, everyone wants people to be able to work, but if you're being paid, you know, such a little amount that it's actually impeding your ability to actually go get a job because you can't even afford the transport, surely that's not in anyone's interest. So we need to lift that so that it's a decent amount that people can survive on.
Secretary of the ACTU, Sally McManus, thanks for your time, as always.
Thanks, Kieran.